In the UFC, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is well known. The Gracie family set up a competition to show that they were the best at what they did. Some people have been submitted by wrestling, but some of the moves in this video show how good Jiu-Jitsu can help mixed martial artists win fights. So, to thank the Gracies and the UFC for all they've done for the sport, here are the top 15 submissions that have ever happened in the octagon. Number 15. Frank Mir vs. Tim Sylvia. Armbar. Even though it was awful to see, Frank Mir broke Tim Sylvia's arm. This showed that fighters with big limbs can be at a disadvantage. It also showed how good a referee Herb Dean was because he saw the broken arm and stopped the fight even though both fighters wanted to keep going. Referees like Dean keep the sport in good shape, and submissions like that make fans want to watch more. Number 14. Chan Sung Jung vs. Leonard Garcia. Playing Twister. Jung is one in a million. He is called the Korean Zombie. People cheer for him because he is a humble warrior, but he also does well in the ring. When he first came to the United States, it looked like he wasn't much of a fighter. However, his last two fights, a submission win and a quick knockout win, showed that he was more. Most of the people watching didn't know what a twister was, but Jung changed that and showed that MMA is always getting better. Number 13. Rousimar Palhares vs. Ivan Salaverry. Armbar. Rousimar Palhares went from having his opponent's back to putting him or her in an armbar. The move is surprising and shows that even the best jiu-jitsu fighter can trap his opponent if he knows what he's doing. Palhares was able to trick Ivan Salaverry into letting him get the submission by making him worry about a choke and then moving quickly enough to avoid his opponent's armbar defense. The first time I saw it, it was impressive, and it's worth seeing again. Number 12. Phil Davis vs. Tim Boetsch. Kimura Modified. Phil Davis is known as Mr. Wonderful, and while he didn't show it against Rashad Evans the last time, he did against Tim Boetsch. Davis used a change to the Kimura to grab Boetsch's arm with one hand and pull it behind him. Because it was so great, people started calling it the Philmura or Mr. Wonderful. When your name is on a piece of writing, you know it's good. Number 11. Forrest Griffin vs. Mauricio Shogun Rua. Rear naked choke. The move itself was impressive, but the fact that no one saw it coming made it even more so. The winner of the TV show The Ultimate Fighter was Forrest Griffin. He was a tough fighter with some flaws. Mauricio Rua had been in Pride for a long time and had won the middleweight Grand Prix before. During the fight, both men beat each other up badly until Griffin hit Rua so hard that he was knocked out and Griffin was able to move into a choke. It took his career to a whole new level and made a great highlight reel. Number 10. Kurt Pellegrino vs. Nate Diaz. Triangle choke. Diaz did a great job of setting up his choke submission move by using the cage. Diaz showed his opponent and his supporters how he felt even after he started using this method. He did this by making an offensive hand gesture. He was so sure that he had won, he even looked at the judge. Given how nice the submission was, it's not surprising that he was so full of himself, or that he won that evening. Number 9. Matt Hughes vs. Ricardo Almelda. Dave Schultz front headlock. Matt Hughes put Ricardo Almelda to sleep at UFC 117, and no one knew what they had just seen. No one except wrestlers and people who like wrestling. Hughes put on a Dave Schultz front headlock that hit Almelda so hard that he was out before he knew what happened. Most of them were confused until they found out what it was all about. It showed that Hughes was still up to something and wasn't done yet. Number 8. Dan Severn vs. Mark Coleman. Side choke. This fight showed how afraid other fighters were to let Mark Coleman attack them, and it was also a great example of how shoes can change the way a fight goes. Coleman and Dan Severn were both allowed to wear grappling boots, which helped them a lot on the mat and made them much better wrestlers. It also showed why both of them were in the UFC. Both men tried to get the match over quickly, but Coleman got the choke first. Number 7. Demian Maia vs. Ed Herman. Triangle choke. No one knows what happened to Demian Maia. At this point in his career, Maia was a machine when it came to giving up. He was killing everyone who got in his way, and his fight with Ed Herman showed how dangerous he was. At one point, he was able to roll Herman back down to the ground by wrapping one of his legs around one of Herman's. He could also easily switch positions on Herman, which made people think that Maia was connected to Gumby. Maia has lost some of his most recent fights because he chose to stand and fight. But it's important to remember that he used to be a very dangerous ground fighter. Number 6. John Jones vs. Lyoto Machida. Standing guillotine choke. At UFC 140, John Jones put Lyoto Machida to sleep with a choke. He did it by sitting down and standing up. That second part is one of the coolest things you can do in the cage. And the fact that Jones did it against a great fighter like Machida shows how far he has come. Jones's legendary submission won't be the last time fans see it, but for now, it is. Number 5. Frank Mir vs. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Kimura. His arm broke like a bird's wing. We've all heard that sentence before, and Frank Mir proved it when he put a Kimura on the arm of Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. He raised it right away, and Nogueira's arm broke so badly that he had to get surgery after the fight. It's Nogueira's fault that he didn't tap, but he's also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and didn't want to admit that he was being submitted. It led to a bad break and one of the best submissions in UFC history. Number 4. Dustin Poirier vs. Max Holloway. Mounted triangle armbar. Dustin Poirier had to look good when he fought Max Holloway, who was new to the UFC. He did this by putting his opponent in an armbar and forcing him to give up. He could do it while on horseback. This is not an easy thing to do, and Poirier's win was both the submission of the night and a big moment in UFC history. Number 3. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira vs. Tim Sylvia. Guillotine choke. Even though Antonio Nogueira took so much damage during the fight, it's amazing that he was still able to submit Tim Sylvia. Sylvia had Nogueira down and was doing well against him, but Nogueira was able to drag his opponent to the ground and put himself in a position to finish him. It's one reason why Sylvia used to be a champion and why Nogueira is such a big name in MMA. Number 2. Chael Sonnen vs. Anderson Silva. Triangle armbar. Most people who read the book already know how the war ended. Anderson Silva was chased around the ring by Chael Sonnen for 4.5 rounds, and Sonnen lost every second of the fight. Then, when it looked like the champion was going to lose his title, Silva came back and put Sonnen in a triangle armbar. Even though there was so little time left on the clock, Sonnen was forced to tap out. It made Silva even more famous and showed why he is the most successful UFC champion ever. Number 1. Royce Gracie vs. Gerard Gordeau. Rear naked choke. This might have been the best submission ever to happen in the octagon, because it made Gracie the first UFC champion and proved how great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is. It wasn't the first submission, but it won the competition and made the Gracie name famous. It would be where MMA and the UFC as we know them today got their start. Nothing could be better than that. Thanks for watching this video. Stay tuned for more interesting information.